So we're in Chapter 10 covering the local government, and the goals for learning are to describe county government and name the powers it has, and then to describe the duties of various county officials, to describe city government and name the power it has, and then last, to describe 3 types of city government. You know, when the colonists first settled in America, they decided to elect leaders and make laws, and it just started to create order for them. And these were small communities, and now these kinds of local small communities, we call them cities or towns, and they affect our lives in a more immediate way, and we're able to affect other people's lives in our community in a more immediate way if we decided to be more active in politics. So local government provides many services and helps protect people's lives and their property. And you can create change by attending local meetings. They can be city council meetings, town meetings, however your county or city operates, you would know what to attend. And we'll get into that later. But you know, during the early history of the United States, counties existed to take care of more of the rural areas, so it was more countryside. So people in the areas far from towns, they had a county government, and that was it. And that usually served several towns or cities. So a county actually included many cities, and that's still true today. For instance, in South Lake Tahoe, we're in El Dorado County, and that includes many cities. Each county or town serves as the county seat. So there's one place in the county that is kind of like the capital of the county, and we call it the county seat. So who are these people that run the county government? Well, the government is run by a board. They call it the county board. And they are elected officials. So we actually choose who is to be on that board. Some states use other names for this board. They might call it the Board of Commissioners or the Board of Supervisors. Or also there's something called the Commissioners Court. And they pass laws about public health and welfare. So that's primarily their concern. So you might hear about Health and Human Services passing laws about vehicle safety or housing issues. That's mainly the concern, is the welfare of citizens. And the county board also may set the amount of taxes to be collected and may manage road construction in the county. In many cases, they also make zoning decisions, and that basically determines how land is going to be divided. Is it going to be a home or is it going to be a business? Should we have this neighborhood? As you notice, if you look around, there's residential areas and then there's businesses, and that's because of zoning decisions made by our county government. So if you ever want to open a business in a certain area, you would want to ask the county government if their zoning allows for that, just FYI. Stores may not be built on land that is zoned for houses. There can be certain cases where that's allowed. The county board also supervises libraries and jails and court buildings. So let's go into more detail about what other duties are handled by county officials. Usually the county officials are elected to carry out special duties, and we elect the sheriff is one. They're the chief county law enforcement officer, and they carry out court orders. So they work closely with the courts, and they can arrest people who break the law. Most sheriffs are in charge of the county jail, and usually the county jail is a beautiful structure, and I say that sarcastically. The county clerk keeps records, so if you ever want your birth certificate, you would hopefully know what county you were born in and contact the county clerk. This is where a record of birth, deaths, and marriages are held. So the clerk also keeps copies of deeds and those are records of the sale of land or buildings. So basically the county clerk is the keeper of records. There's a county treasurer who oversees the money collected and spent in the county. There's the auditor who checks county financial records and sees that they are correct. So they're pretty much ensuring that we're keeping everything in order. And then the prosecuting attorney, otherwise known as the district attorney, prosecutes or brings legal action against people who have violated county or state laws. So large counties have purchasing agents or coroners, public defenders, and public health nurse. A public health nurse is very necessary in helping to inform people of what kind of diseases are out there, and they kind of oversee the public health branch which is a huge organization that tracks the well-being of the people. So those are additional jobs you might notice. So for many years, most American citizens lived in rural areas, like on farms or in small towns. And as our population has grown, we have shifted from rural to more urban or city areas. And city governments, they must serve the needs of many people. So this is sometimes difficult because some areas of large cities have become exceedingly crowded. So city governments are responsible for many things, and some of these things are overseeing police forces, fire protection, road repair, clean water, public transportation, and trash collection, which during the Industrial Revolution, and I call it a revolution because a lot of new policies and laws had to come into place, because trash it used to be run by the mafia, believe it or not, and it became a private organization where they made money, and so it was becoming kind of an illegal operation, and trash was ending up building in streets, causing a lot of diseases. So it shifted to city control, meaning public responsibility. Tax dollars went into helping to provide trash collection. So a city government provides cultural and recreational activities as well that are important parts of city life. And when I mean cultural, we're talking libraries, museums, parks and gardens, art galleries and theaters that can be supported by city funds. Now, you might notice some cities, when you drive through them, do not have these things. They might have other evidence of interests of the people. First, I'm going to mention where city governments get their power, and then we'll talk about the money. The state legislators issue what they call city charters to communities that want to become cities. So say there's a big group of people and there's enough of them, and they want to be recognized as their own body of sovereignty, meaning having their own determination in policies and rules and tax collection. So a charter is a plan of government that outlines the powers given to a city. So a charter permits a city to have its own governing group separate from the areas around it, right? And so that's where we get the boundaries. And then now, where do we get government? Where does the government get its funds? So counties, cities, and other types of local government, they need money to provide services for people. And we mentioned those services earlier, such as a police force, trash collection, road maintenance, and such. So there's three kinds of taxes that are the main sources of income for local governments. There's property tax, and we'll go into more detail on what these taxes really mean. There's sales tax, so on items of food, and then there's income taxes on the income that people make. And most local governments receive their largest income from property and sales tax. Some local governments do not tax incomes. Okay, so more detail on these taxes. Property tax includes the land and buildings on it. So the value of the property is determined by the town or city or county assessor. So the assessor is a person who sets the value of the property. So they go onto your property and they look at your buildings and whatever's on your property. And then the value of the property is called the assessed value. So the assessed value can change as the condition of the property or buildings improves or gets worse. So if you improve your property or your building, your assessed value will go up. So the local government sets the tax rate on the property, usually a certain dollar amount for every $100 of assessed value. So the greater the value of your property, bang, the higher your tax rate. So if a town, county, or city needs more money, it can raise the tax rate. On to sales tax. A sales tax is a tax placed on items people buy. So I know if you buy cigarettes or alcohol, those things are called sin taxes, and why they say that is you're being taxed for something you don't necessarily need, right? You don't need cigarettes. However, a lot of cities do not tax such necessary items as milk or eggs. So oftentimes you won't find certain food products taxed. In some areas, food and medicine are not taxed. So not only milk and eggs, but certain medicines that people might need. So taxes are more for superfluous things, things that are unnecessary. Some people think that the sales tax is not fair because everybody, rich or poor, pays the same amount of tax on an item. I'm just throwing that out there. And then income tax. Local governments get their money from other sources, and income tax is one. They'll tax how much you make. Sometimes they sell something called bonds to raise money for building projects. Much money is raised in fees for licenses. So if you get a vehicle, you have to pay for your license. What else? This is a big one, a third of local income may be received from federal and state governments. So that's 30%. That's a lot. Many poor local governments probably would not operate without additional financial aid. So how are cities governed? Well, government is a Latin root for the state of being directed. The ment part of government means state of. Govern means to direct. So how are cities directed? There are three forms of government, main forms of government you'll find in a city. And we're going to go more deeply into each one of these. There's the mayor council, and it's the most common. There's one called a commission. And then third, there's a council manager. In 2013, our South Lake Tahoe mayor, which we have, is a mayor council. His name is Tom Davis. Cities are usually governed by one of three forms of government, and so we're going to discuss the first form. It's the most common, the mayor council. The mayor council city government has something called the chief executive or leader, and they are called the mayor. Both the mayor and the council are elected by voters, so we choose who's going to represent and direct us as a people in our city. So each member of the council may represent a ward, and that term ward means a section in the city. So the council members that work with the mayor, they'll each have a section of the city to oversee. And a ward is a small area or section, so either the mayor or the council appoints the heads of the departments that operate the city. And what do I mean by that? Heads of the departments, they choose the head of the police. the head of the fire, the head of the parks, the head of the finance or public works. So the mayor chooses these heads. And there's a lot of heads floating around, and it's just crazy. So for our second form of government in city is commission. And the commission has committed people. You notice how I'm playing with words here. Committed people on a mission. So we call these people commissioners. And in this type, there usually is no mayor, though they do select one person to represent and act as a mayor. So they pretty much might run certain ceremonies, they keep order, they run meetings. Each commissioner is elected by the people, and they work together as a group to run the city's government. Now, how do they do that? How do they run the government? There's a lot to run, right? Because if we're talking about govern, we're talking about direction, and these people are in charge of giving direction. Direction to what specifically, though? If we're going to ground this in reality, we have to say, well, each commissioner heads one of the city departments. So one of them is going to be heading the police department and the fire department. One of them is going to be in charge of running health care, the other recreation. So they determine the direction of each of these services because that is what the city government does. It provides services to the people. So as you noticed in the prior slide, we were talking about the city manager, or the mayor council, the mayor council. The mayor chooses who the head of the departments are. In this case, though, what's different is the commissioners are actually the head of the department. So that's the difference. Okay, now we're on to council manager. This is run more like a business. So this is the third version of city government. And they also call it the city manager plan. I lived in a town that had this, and usually it has an elected council that acts as the city's lawmaking body. So there's a number of people, maybe 6, maybe more. And the city is run so closely like a business that sometimes they hire a city manager who handles the city's business under the direction of the council. So the council is kind of like the boss of the manager and oversees the manager. And the city manager appoints department heads. And notice how the city manager is kind of functioning a lot like a mayor in terms of appointing city department heads. What else do I have to say about that? It's pretty straightforward. It's run like a business and hired by city council, appointed by the city manager. One thing that might be different is if the towns are very small, a lot of these people volunteer their time. The city I lived in, Arcata, all the people in the council actually volunteered, keeping the city going. So these people who are elected are committed citizens. Sometimes they have an agenda. Maybe they have an agenda around local businesses. But typically that agenda can be checked by those who vote these people in. Okay, so we're going to just do a little overview over other kinds of local governments. There are small communities that are called towns, townships, boroughs, parishes, or villages. We don't use the term village too often in the United States. But most have received a charter from the state to operate. So again, a charter defines, delineates what the powers of government the city has. So the smaller the community, the more likely the government will be simple and the less departments and services. Many mayors and city council members are volunteers, like I said earlier. So a mayor-council government is often used in these communities. So it's tinier community, usually there's a mayor. Sometimes there's just a mayor. For New England towns, and I just wanted to post a little map on the right so you can be refreshed on what are these New England states. They were kind of the original states. They are towns. Most of them are towns, so that's their basic unit of government. And they have a form of government called a direct democracy, where voters gather to conduct town business. So, meaning the people are directly involved in decision making. Meetings are held once a year and more if necessary, if there's an emergency. And they come together similar to the old times, where people were really involved in town hall meetings. They would come together and share their point of view, sometimes in an utter emotional and volatile moments. You'd hear great speeches. Sojourner Truth, an African-American woman during the times of slavery, shouted, "Ain't I a woman?" And her statement was meaning she deserves the same respect as other women. And during that time, that statement, "Ain't I a woman?" was held in a meeting like this. So when there are heated topics, people do come together in a direct democracy. Now, this type of government began during colonial times, and meetings were popular events then, and most everyone attended. However, attendance has dropped these days, and I'm wondering what you think about that, because now they elect representatives to attend the meetings, so it's not as much of a direct democracy. So what is a township? Is it a ship with a town on it? No! Some states in the middle Atlantic and Midwestern regions of the United States have township governments. And in general, townships are found in rural parts of counties. So more countryside, right? And so people of townships usually elect officials to serve on a board of commissioners. Remember, committed people on a mission, or trustees. So a trustee is a person who is given power to act for others. So you entrust them with certain roles and responsibilities that impact you. So this board makes rules and regulations for the township, and the board also may include a tax collector, a clerk, the person who collects all the paperwork and documents, and then there's a justice of peace. Then there's also villages and boroughs. Now, we don't really hear this term very often because they're usually extremely tiny communities of about 200 families or so. And they sometimes choose to run their own government. So they want to collect their own taxes and provide for their own street repairs and fire protection. And they also sometimes provide other services as needed, whatever comes up within the village. So most officials of a village or borough, they serve part-time because it is such a small community. And if it gets too large, of course, they can appeal to the state legislature to grant them a city charter.